Hello, and in this video we will go over plotting our data in ForMAPL, getting things like diameter distributions, basal area distributions, and looking at our data across different groupings in real time. So in the previous two videos we talked about importing our data, then filtering it, and mapping it, so now we'll work on plotting our data. So I still have my ForMAPL open from the last video, so I'll go ahead and open it here. If you remember, we finished off by making a selection on Isle of Royal here to look at some of our plots. So if you made a selection in the Map tab, if you go over to the Plot tab, you should immediately see those selected items here as a diameter distribution. So let's talk about the layout here. So here we have our data controls, which let us change things like the plots that we've selected, our grouping variables, legend variables, legend filters, as well as our plot controls, just the theme, the palette, different bins, and in the plot itself, we can control things like the size, the title, the fonts, etc. And so for the diameter distribution, first thing you're going to see is on the top, we have a number. So this number corresponds to the number of plots being summarized to a per unit area value. So right now we have 51 plots selected. You can see 51. And the plot is showing us the per acre value of all these 51 plots summarized together. And on the left, we can see we have our, again, trees per unit area. In our case, it's per acre because the FIA uses acres. But if you upload your data in a different unit, it'll be in that unit as well. We have our diameter class here also in inches on the x-axis. And our species over here, and our legend on the right. So you can go ahead and you can either make this plot full screen by clicking on expand, which is quite nice, or you can take this slider on the right hand side, you can drag it, you can resize it, do whatever you need to do. Okay. So again, this uses Plotly. So one of the cool things about Plotly is you can hover over a bar, and it will tell you that exact value. So we can see that balsam fir, for example, has 236 trees per acre in the 0-inch class, while something like white spruce has 61 trees per acre. And if you want to isolate just a single value within the columns, the bars, excuse me, you can double click it, and it will show you where those fall in that plot. So you can see we don't have any balsam fir above 14 inches, but let's find one. Let's see, Acer sacro. You can see we have a sugar maple, the 28-inch class, but not a whole lot of regen in the 0 to 2 inches. And you can also click this button to show you all of the values at a time. So we can see we have, in this bar, we have balsam fir, Acer rubrum, sugar maple, and a bunch of other species here. That's pretty cool. That's what Plotly allows you to do. And you can go ahead and save your plot as a file. Go ahead and save this, and it'll be ready for use in publications. That's a little bit about the plot itself. Let's talk about how we can group our data and organize it and make the plot look how we want it to look. So first of all, what we have is our plot IDs. By default, our selection corresponds to the selection from our polygons in our map. You can see we indeed have 51 plots and 51 here aggregated. And we can go ahead and select individual plot IDs to add if we want to from here as well. And the next thing we have is group variables. So this allows us to group our data by certain categories. So by default, again, everything is aggregated to a per acre or per unit area basis. But if we go into group variables, we can change how this is structured. Let's say we want to look at those 51 plots, but split up by their forest name, for example. If we click on that, it's going to take those 51 plots, find the different groups, different forest types in this case, and aggregate each one of those forest types to a per acre or per unit area basis. Let's go ahead and make this a little bigger here. You can see that we have 9 different forest types in Isle Royal, according to our selection, and we can see the number of plots aggregated within each grouping. So you can see we have lots of paper birch plots, 15, only one white pine, red oak, and white ash plot, and hard maple plot as well, and a couple of sugar maple, beech, and yellow birch plots. And so the power of ForMAPL is that we can quickly and easily get different levels of our data aggregated on the fly. with this grouping. And if you were to go in here and add up all of these labels, all these numbers would add up to, again, 51. Okay. So sometimes this can be a little difficult to see. So depending on how your data is aggregated, you can either resize it, making it bigger, or you can change the diameter classes. So if we go for the plot, we can do things like change the diameter class bins. So if we make these 5-inch bins, now it's much easier to see some of these bins as well. If you make it full screen, a little bit cleaner, and it aggregates everything again on the fly, depending on your bins and your groupings. So going back to the data, we can also filter our legend variable. So by default, we show our species. So this is going to color our variable by species. And we can filter these as well. Let's say we only want to look at red maple, for example. We can go ahead and select red maple. That's actually not a good one because there's very little red maple. Let's do sugar maple. So here we can see in yellow we have sugar maple, and everything else is classified as other. So within in your selections, you can display what you want to show. So we can see that on most of our plots, we don't have any sugar maple at all, except in the hard maple, of course, hard maple sites. And so this allows you to easily highlight the species you want to look at. So let's actually go ahead and get rid of this grouping here. And now we can see this a little bit more clearly. So you can see that within our filter, within all of our classes, we have a little bit of Acer sugar maple. We can go ahead and add things like, let's see, white spruce. There we go. We have a white spruce component as well in our size classes. Black spruce, not so much. Let's see, trembling aspen. There's a little bit of component there. And so by default, it's going to show this aggregated with all of your data. So we can see 51 plots. Here's how much this species contributes, and everything else is grouped as this other variable. If you want to change how this other variable is described, we can call this whatever we want. We can call this SVP other, for example, and it will change the label on the fly. And if for some reason you don't want to include the plots that don't contain the key species you're interested in, you can turn off show filtering, and now it will, you see the numbers change to 48. So now this will only include the plots that include the core species you're interested in. The sugar maple, white spruce, and trembling aspen. And now when we look at these species, we can see this is again aggregated in that selection, only the plots we're interested in that contain these species. So again, if we go back and show filtered, it's now going to take all of the plots and show you the percentage of the species that those fall in. With the show filtered unchecked, it's only going to look at the plots that contain these species. So this allows you to kind of mix and match how you want to show your data. Okay, that's all the stuff here in the data tab. The plot tab, we can do things like change our theme. So if we don't like this default theme, we can choose a classic theme, a minimal theme, black and white theme, a light theme, a void theme. Okay, this one's a little weird. I might not pick that one, or a gray theme. Whatever type of theme you want to meet your standard. Let's go with classic for now. You can see we have a nice clean axis and no lines. We can also change our color palette. So if we want something different, we can pick that as well. And we also have this option to fix our palette. So similar to the mapping, the palette is currently locked to your entire species data. So if you have all of your data uploaded, fixing the palette will make sure that Acer sacrum will always stay the same within your plots. If you turn this off, it's going to reseal the data to be colored only by what is shown in your plot. So if you want your plots to stay consistent throughout your filtering, leave this enabled. If you want them to change based upon what's shown, disable it. We also have diameter bins, so as shown before, we can change our bin sliders. So if we want 1-inch classes, we can go back to that. Let's go back to 5-inch classes. We can control the diameter range. So if we only want to consider trees greater than 5 inches, we can slide that up to 5. Now our data will automatically, on the fly, adjust to show the values. in that diameter range. So again, if we go back to 1-inch bins, you can indeed see that those trees less than 0 have been cut off. We can add back whatever we want as we need to. So let's say we want to look at saw timber trees, we can go between 10 and let's say 16 inches, and there we go. Those are our saw timber trees there. Got a lot of aspen. Actually, not too much at all, only 3 trees per acre. Those are some of the things we can do there. You may have noticed there's also this thing called year bin. So if you have multiple inventory years in your data, you can go to your group variables and you can group your data by year. So what this is going to show is how your data has changed over time. So with FIA, we can see that on Isle of Royal, there were 35 plots that were inventoried between 2005 and 2009, and only 3 that were remeasured between 2010 and 2014. And so what you can do here is with this year bin, you can change the number of different year periods. So if we want to see plots measured every year, we can see how many plots were measured in each year. Or we can aggregate them into larger areas, such as 10-year bins. You can see within the period 2005, 2014, there are only 38 measurements. But if we change the bin to be different years, it'll be 2005 to 2009 is a 5-year bin, 2010 to 2014 is another 5-year bin, and how that changes. We can also change the year range, so if we only want to look at plots newer than a certain year, let's say 28 and up, we can do that. And you can see that the number of plots immediately changes. And it's going to, again, aggregate everything on that per acre value, depending on your groupings. And you can mix and match this with forest type too. So let's say you want to look at these 10-year, let's say we want to look at all of our plots across a 10-year bin, let's say 5-year bin, and we want to include these 3 species here, but we want to see how this changes by forest type. We can do that as well. So now you can see this is kind of the power of ForMAPL. We can see that within each forest type and year grouping, the number of plots automatically calculated on the fly for us on a per acre basis, which is quite cool. So let's go back to, let's clear this here and go back to the default and look at a couple of other things we can change. So within the plot settings, we can add a title to our plots. We can call this diameter distribution. You can see we can add a title. We can change the axes labels. We can make this trees per acre. Diameter class in inches. And you can see these change on the fly depending on what we set. We can also change the font size. So if you want this to be bigger, we can do like a 20-point font, and it's going to make it really, really beefy, depending on how you need this to look. Or we can go really, really small, and we can do like a 2-point font. You can see that's really, really, really tiny, and no one can read that. By default, the font size is, I believe, 12. So you can adjust the components individually. So if you want a bigger title, you can drag this up. You can see we can make the title bigger. Let's say we want to make the axes title bigger as well. We can do that. It will change on the fly depending on what we want. Okay, so that's the diameter distribution. We also have basal area distribution plots. So all of those same settings apply, but they, in this case, we can look at basal area. So if we want to see our basal area change over different diameter classes, we can see that. So we can see the basal area per acre values here, as well as the basal area percentage of our different species within that grouping. So if you don't have show filters enabled, it's going to show the percent based upon selected species. So you can see we have 47% white spruce, 46% trembling aspen, and 35% sugar maple. If we enable show filter, you'll see this is going to change to show that 62% of all those selections is actually the other species, while these 3 species make up only a smaller proportion. So make sure again that you actually have the data you want to show. It can be misleading to show only the filtered basal area. This would make people think that there's no other tree species in your selection, which is not the case. So I'd recommend leaving this other enabled, or the show filtered enabled, to make sure you're comparing it against all of your data, and not just the filtered species you're interested in. And again, both these plots, basal area, percentage, these can be grouped by different things as well. If we go by forest type, we can get the same thing. We can see how these change by forest type, as well as, again, basal area distribution by different forest types. And so, yes, you can aggregate your data on the fly and visualize it however you see fit. So this is the plotting. And the next part, we'll finish off with data exporting.